is April Graff. She is a dietitian at HyVee Hilltop in Mankato. This is the third time that April is back with us, and today she's going to explain how to stock your pantry and pull delicious and nutritious meals out of the cupboard basics. So welcome back, April.
Hello, I'm excited to be back. This is always so much fun getting to, virtually see or chat with you guys. So today we are going to talk about the pantry. It's something that we all have and something that, if set up properly and well, it can help solve that super annoying problem and question that happens every day about 4:30, 5 o'clock. And that's, what's for dinner? What do you want for supper? What are you cooking? That happens. We all need to eat. Food doesn't magically appear in our, on our plates. And so we're just going to talk about how to take your pantry and use it as a tool and not just the storage for random bags of things that kind of go there to die and get lost. So when we talk about pantry cooking, I'm talking about those items that are shelf stable that you put in the cupboard, things like the canned goods, dry goods like pastas and rices, canned tomatoes, some sauces. But I'm also talking about things that have a longer shelf life that aren't going to spoil, things that you can put in your freezer and keep, things that are like a fresh produce item that has a long shelf life, potato, for instance. And I'll go through some specifics and how to set that up. And then I'll also send a PDF that will be emailed out, or that can be emailed out to you guys, that just has more of a comprehensive list as well. So I'm not just talking about things you put in your cupboard, but those long lasting things that you can buy and that can be there for you in a pinch. Another great perk of pantry cooking is it tends to be budget friendly. One of the reasons why food can be more expensive, specifically healthier food, is because a lot of times it's perishable. It gets rotten, the fresh fruits and vegetables and things like that. And so that cost obviously has to be passed along to you, us, the consumers. And so having food that doesn't go bad quickly generally is less expensive. And that makes sense when we talk about fresh produce versus frozen produce versus canned produce. Obviously the frozen and the canned is much less perishable, thus cheaper for you that way. And it lends itself to flexibility. I think we still are seeing some supply chain hiccups. We're seeing a lot of products or a lot of brands aren't making the number of products or the variety or flavors or sizes of products that they have. They're still keeping their product portfolio pretty narrow and lean due to a variety of reasons. And there's just times that certain foods aren't available to us. And so pantry cooking really gives you that formula that you can adjust based on what's available, either in the grocery stores, in your house. And it's also great for picky eaters. So if any of you are picky eaters, or if any of you have picky eaters at home, a lot of the meals and ideas that we're talking about today are a little more adaptable to having some customization that maybe you wouldn't get through traditional recipes and cooking as well. So for a pantry, or I guess for recipes, there's really two different types of ingredients. One are really those that are super specific to the recipe. Maybe it's a fancy herb, maybe it's a certain type of protein, maybe it's a special shape of noodle, for instance, right? Those things that we don't always have on hand, those things that you're like, oh, I don't have any, fill in the blank. And then there's those ones that are really those tried and true, those powerhouses. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is like, again, how to set your pantry up to use it as a tool, and not the storage. So I'm just going to go through a few different things. And if you remember from previous conversations, I'm all about simplicity and that my plate method, the April plate, where half of the food that we're putting on our plate, even our pantry plate, ideally is a fruit or vegetable. A quarter of it is a source of protein. So this could be your different meats, beans, eggs, nuts and seeds, for instance, frozen edamame. And then a quarter of it is a source of carbohydrate. So that's where your breads and pastas and crackers and cereals and tortillas come in. Again, half plate vegetable, quarter plate protein, quarter plate carbohydrate really is the secret to health and wellness, but it's also the secret to coming up with recipes, because as you're grabbing things out of the pantry and you're trying to whip up a meal and make it taste good, those food groups also lend themselves to different textures that are appealing to us. They lend themselves to different flavors, different nutrients, of course, that we've talked about in previous sessions. But it's that culinary aspect that's very great too, because vegetables have lovely flavors. Vegetables have different textures, right? Some are crunchy, some are smooth, depending. And then again, the pasta and then the chewiness of the protein. And so having those ratios, again, not only sets you up nutritionally, but it really helps stay on track for that algorithm, that formula for a delicious meal, one that tastes good. Because if it doesn't taste good, you're probably not going to want to eat it. And then you're going to say, forget about it. Let's go through the drive-through. Let's grab that frozen pizza. And then you've wasted your time and money on those pantry staples. So, all right, to set up a pantry, there's really, I'd say probably 10 different foods or food groups that you should be sure to have on hand that really allow for the most flexibility in those recipes. And then 7 or 8 what I would consider more perishable pantry staples, like the long-lasting produce and things. So we're going to go through those. Number 1, oils. And you get to choose what you like. And that's going to be a trend throughout the whole conversation today, is knowing what you like, not being afraid to try something new. But what I have grabbed, which actually came out of my pantry because I'm at my house today, what I have on hand might not be what you love. And that's okay, because each of us has different tastes and flavors that we gravitate towards. But it's nice to have those things. And so I have some toasted sesame oil. There's a documentary on Netflix. I think it's like sour salt, acid, heat. It's something along those lines that just talks about the purpose and the value of those different like flavorings and agents in our cooking, and the oils and the flavorings and oils and how they lend themselves to different, salt, fat, acid, heat. Oh, okay, good. How it lends itself to different types of cooking. So olive oil, very traditional in Italian style cooking. Toasted sesame seed oil is really great in different Asian dishes. And that oil makes a difference, because if you were to change the type of oil, if you were to saute green beans in olive oil versus green beans in butter versus green beans in toasted sesame oil, they would all taste very different. And it's like the same process, the same basic ingredients, oil, green beans, but the taste and flavor is going to be vastly different, so that you don't feel like you're, what I say, lather, rinse, repeating. You don't feel like you're stuck in the same old cycle. And so the type of oil, flavoring wise, can make things more exciting too. So this just happens to be a toasted sesame oil that I always have on hand. Vinegars and acid-based products are also very great. White wine vinegar, I find this has very similar uses to like distilled vinegar, but it's not so sharp. It's not so pungent and like, not so acidic, I guess. But apple cider vinegar, red wine vinegar, all great. And these really help amp up the taste and flavor without salt, because salt, it's a pantry staple as well, and definitely serves a purpose. And one of its purposes is to amplify taste and flavors. Vinegar and sour things also do that. So that could be acids that come from vinegars, that could be lemon juice, lime juice, and those really help magnify the flavor profile without the salt. Like guacamole without lime, not so great. Guacamole with lime, super great, right? Lovely. Otherwise, let's see, next up, we're going to do herbs and spices. And this is where you can play around as well. It's also really great to do what I say, like the Google search. Google your way out of boredom planning. Like grab an ingredient, grab a spice that you've had in your cupboard because you bought it for the one recipe the one time. And you're like, I don't know how long that's been sitting in here. Grab it, grab the canned quartered artichoke hearts here. Google your meal. Like, okay, I've got artichoke hearts and I've got some Greek seasoning. Google that with the word recipe behind it, and probably 250,000 recipes will pop up with that. So using your pantry as a meal planning tool is great. And I know most of us probably have ridiculous amounts of seasonings that have been hanging out there. Best to use dried herbs and spices within about 6 months. They're not going to go rotten or become harmful. They just won't have the same amount of flavorful bang as what they would if they were used fresh. So purchasing them in sizes that you'll use is important. I only buy this, it's not even that big of a jar, but the bigger jars of things in spices that I know I use. Otherwise I do the little tones or just the little baby guys, because if I'm going to spend the time and money on flavoring things, I want it to actually flavor my food. Next up, stock, broth, and or soup bases. So you can do the cans, you can do the boxes, you can do the powders, or the base, like the liquid, the cream, the base for that. Those are really great to add flavorings. We're talking pasta dishes, soups, to kind of make something out of nothing. Add a little bit of depth of flavor. Add it to rice or even pasta water when you're cooking any kind of grain, just to give it some flavor profile. Yes, that seasoning is great. It's Cavendier's all-purpose Greek seasoning. Let's see if I can hold it up here. Found in the regular aisle. There is a salt-free version as well. I use this instead of the salt-free plus salt. Like on potatoes, it's awesome. Vegetables, it's awesome. Added to lettuce salads, it's awesome to add some too. So yes, thank you for that. What's next? Oh, the carbohydrate. And this is where most of us have an overabundance. I held up my janky, sad half bag of rice that I had in my cupboard, because most of us have these partially used bits, and I'm going to talk about how to use that up in just a minute here. But rices, we can do pastas, breadcrumbs count as carbohydrates. Again, different grains, buckwheat, farro. That's one of my favorite grains. If you haven't tried farro is amazing. Cook it up just like rice. Higher protein, higher fiber than rice. It's a whole grain. It has a little more chew, a little more bite, a little more texture, a little more in that meatiness, like that chew meatiness. A good tortilla. This is also a favorite brand. It's called Tamaro's, and I love it because they're high fiber. They're 7 grams per tortilla. There's 4 grams of protein, but they're relatively low in salt, only 80 milligrams of sodium, as compared to a tortilla this size might have 300 milligrams of salt. And they're nice and flexible. They're not crumbly and cardboardy, and there's tons of different flavors. Crackers count as a carbohydrate. Then we'll get into protein. So I've got canned tuna, canned salmon. The pouched versions are awesome too. These are great. I tend to use these more towards like my lunch options than I do maybe in the evening meal. But these are great if you're like, oh gosh, I don't know, everything's all frozen solid and I haven't thought enough ahead. Like, you got something and you have an option that way. Next up, sauces are great. So this could be spaghetti sauce. This could be things like soy sauce, hot sauce. And can you tell me like sriracha around here? Pesto. Any of these things are going to add flavor without a ton of ingredients. Otherwise, there's different jarred sauces and things. Find the ones you like. Find the ones you enjoy. Find the flavor profiles you like. If you don't tend to like, Asian style cooking and hot pepper sauce, don't buy them. Buy the ones you like, but you should always have a few different options on hand to really, again, throw in with your carbohydrate, with your protein, and vegetables, and you have something fantastic. Canned beans, dried beans, always should be a part of the equation. This is a great way to get in fiber and protein when you're like, oh gosh, everything's frozen again. Garbanzo beans, black beans, those are the 2 that I normally have on hand. Those are the 2 that I prefer. I do have dried beans on hand, but you gotta do stuff with them for a long time. And for me, that pantry meal should be able to be assembled quickly and mindlessly, and planning ahead hours and hours to pre-soak and cook up the beans isn't how I use pantry cooking, but economical, very much so. So you get to decide again what works for you. There's not one size fits all. Canned vegetables, I already showed the artichoke hearts. These are great because you get that vegetable in and they don't have a ton of flavor. You can get the marinated ones that do have some more flavor, but they add in really well to pastas, or if you want to take and make like a grain salad, like a tabbouleh style, if you have some little bits of leftover things and want to throw it together, those go in very well. Canned tomatoes, even canned green beans and peas, if you like their taste and texture. If you don't, then don't buy them. But canned tomatoes are great because you can always make it into a sauce. You can turn it into pizza sauce if you're like, oh crap, I don't have any, or spaghetti sauce. Again, add it to pasta or like a more of a Mexican style meal. And then I like nuts as the pantry because you can use them as a snack and they really help add that crunchy texture that I think is lacking in a lot of recipes, especially kind of thrown together ones. You can sprinkle, like pepitas or slivered almonds on a soup, in a salad, even on top of pasta. And it just adds that texture that, again, I think sometimes isn't there. Other pantry staples, we're talking about potatoes, we're talking about onions, and other long-lasting vegetables. Cabbage will last weeks in the fridge. Broccoli, cauliflower, kale, carrot, celery, frozen meats. Shrimp makes a great one. Citrus, eggs, frozen veggies, those are all great. And again, I'm going to send out the list of this so you don't have to like frantically write all this down. But I do want to spend the last couple minutes talking about some different recipe templates, maybe is the best way to say that I use when I'm cooking from the pantry. So when my pantry's overflowing, or I'm like, I've seen this bag of rice hanging out in my cupboard for far too long and I need to get rid of it. Or if I have, maybe I have some leftover cooked rice, or I have some leftover roasted vegetables, or I have some leftover things that don't make sense for like a whole meal. It's just like a portion of something. And I'm like, I don't want to use it up, but I'm not just going to like microwave a bowl of roasted cabbage and have that be a meal. How can I bake it into something? By grabbing other things that I have on hand. And these are kind of the generic things that I'll go through and like, what do I have and what do I feel like? One is a snack board, the charcuterie board, the grazing board, they're everywhere, but pretty much it's random bits of food put together and you just snack on it. And this is important to think about and remember that half plate fruits or vegetables, quarter plate protein, quarter plate carbohydrate, just so that you get the variety of nutrients, you get the variety of textures and flavors. We've got some sweet, you've got some salty, you've got some crunchy, you've got some smooth. And that's where the things like nuts will come in handy, those long-lasting vegetables that you can supplement anything that you have, and just kind of throw those in. So those snack boards or grazing boards are amazing pantry pulls. Next up, probably the most common that we use at my house are bowls. Rice bowl, grain bowls, because they can take on any flavor profile you like and any one that you have on hand. And these are great, again, for using up the little bits of leftover or current rice, because this wouldn't be enough to feed my family. So now I'm like stuck with this, right? So do I buy another bag and then try to have it? And then I always have extras, or do I just cook this up and we make do with it? But those, you can use cauliflower as cauliflower rice, more of like a Mexican theme with like black beans and salsa and cheese. You could do like a Greek one that we'll do this actually quite a bit. We roast up garbanzo beans and that's our protein. You could do chicken or something else if you prefer to, but roasted garbanzo beans in the oven is that protein. And then we'll do cucumbers and tomatoes and feta, some hearty grains, vegetables, whatever random things we have left over, this seasoning sprinkled on top. But it is that kind of like, all right, what flavor profiles do I gravitate towards? For me, it's probably three. more of like a Mexican style with like the cumin and the salsa and like that taco burrito kind of feel. Greek style where I use more of the like basil and oregano, this Greek seasoning, Kalamata olives, feta cheese, cucumbers, tomatoes. That I'll do, and you'll hear me repeat throughout these dishes. And then probably Asian style things I do. I have like soy sauce or the sriracha style dishes. So those are probably the three that when I'm like, I don't know what to make, that I'll gravitate towards and create these leftovers with. Kebabs, these are super fun. Again, you can do leftovers and you don't have to poke them on a stick, but if you have kids, they're super fun, or it makes a really pretty entertaining thing where you can take bits of meat and vegetables. One thing that we like are the frozen tortellinis, like the cheese-filled tortellinis. You can get the fresh ones. And those are they're kind of fun and yummy, and that'll be your carbohydrate choice. Pizzas like the perfect throw it all on, roast it up dish. Soups. I'm hoping at some point the weather gets nice enough that soup won't be a go-to choice for a while, but soup is really great. Soup is the original dump it in, how to use leftovers, how to stretch a penny type of a thing where you can do fresh or frozen or chunks and bits of things and make it a go. But again, remember, carbohydrate, half plate vegetable, half bowl vegetable, protein, where you want each of those food groups to really help balance your blood sugar, to give you the taste and flavor profile that you're looking for. Wraps are amazing. They're the throw it all in. This lends itself, along with the snack boards, the bowls, even the kebabs, to those picky eaters where they can assemble things themselves, shred up some carrots, beans, hummus. This is like the clean out the fridge type of a thing. And often this is what we'll do. I'm like, I'm not cooking on Sunday. I know I've got tortillas and wraps. Assemble something and call it done. And my family knows, like, we have a meal. It's the vegetable and the protein and carbohydrate. And so they know to assemble that. And again, if you think that through, not only nutritionally is it going to be balanced, but it's going to feel like a balanced meal and not like a hodgepodge of things. Pasta. This is amazing because you can garbage dump anything with your pasta as well. Yeah, this is where those canned vegetables, the tomato sauces, even the canned meats you can throw in if you don't have fresh meat or if you don't feel like thawing out frozen meat. Otherwise, canned beans are really great, whether they're the garbanzo beans or a softer bean like a white bean is a little bit softer texture, a little creamier texture, and it would blend in really nicely there. And then last but certainly not least, baked potato bar. So we're taking that carbohydrate, and that's kind of the theme of all of these, right? We take that carbohydrate and then we find the protein and then we add the other flavor enhancers, meaning like the vegetables and sauces on top. So we've got the baked potato where you can put, again, the taco theme for nachos. You could do a little fresher with tomatoes and this awesome seasoning and just use up those bits. But I love those because there's times like I love olives. My kids haven't grown to love olives yet. And so they can pick and choose what that looks like for their meals, for their plate. And I don't have to do the fight that comes with recipes or ingredients that they don't love, but they're also exposed to new things so that over time they can learn to enjoy them, which has worked well so far. But it really helps us, again, use those foods that we have either in the fridge that are sitting there or in that pantry that you're wanting to use up here. So I'm going to open up the chat. And while I look through this chat, feel free to type in additional questions. But I did want to also point out, we have a lot of service options available at HyVee because HyVee is based in Mankato, and many of you are not located near us. We have a ton of virtual services as well. And you can sign up to receive our generic newsletter as like for a consumer, but also we have a like worksite wellness style newsletter that is geared towards services that employer or employer groups can offer to their employees as additional resources. And so that could be presentations like this, that could be individual counseling. We have cooking classes that are virtual. We have freezer meal classes that are virtual. We have kids cooking classes that are virtual. Every Wednesday at noon, we offer a free lunch and learn or like an educational topic for 30 minutes that employees and consumers can participate in. So if it is something that you're interested in, you can always reach out to me at HyVee and I can get you linked up to those resources personally or through that newsletter as well. So in looking through this, yeah, looks like you guys had some awesome suggestions for products that, oh, great. Tracy says the school has done some of the HyVee classes and they really enjoy it. And Stephanie, I would agree, FDA should update some of their guidelines to reflect, current information, best practices. I think it's hard with such varied population, health-wise, economic-wise, etc. But yeah, I agree that the recommendations could be bumped up a little bit. But with that, I thank you guys for inviting me on. I'm super happy to have had a chance to speak. So with that, I'm not sure who's taken over the conversation, but
April, thank you so much. You always have fun in new ways, just to show us how to enjoy food more. So I know I'll be taking some hints and stuff down and along with others, and we're looking forward to your handout, and Chris will send that out to the group as well. So I think up next, Nicole's going to do some